Hello dear crypto friends and welcome to this new video, and today we are going to take a look at under what conditions will Bitcoin and the crypto market have a huge bull run this year. There is a strong condition under which this can happen, and this is, as you can imagine, very much tied to the dollar index and to the stock market. So let's dive right into the dollar index and try to understand if there is a chance for a crypto bull run this year. We start with our good old chart where we compare the dollar index with Bitcoin, and we have established quite a few times now on this channel that the dollar index is inversely correlated to the Bitcoin price chart. In orange we have the long-term Bitcoin price chart in logarithmic scaling, and with a candlestick chart we have the dollar index. The dollar index is the dollar versus the most important other fiat currencies on this planet, like the euro, the Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, and so on and so forth. So that is the dollar index. It measures how strong the dollar is with regard to other currencies. So right now, as we can see, what is happening? The dollar index is pumping like crazy. It's rising. It's already above 100. It's already above 100 and it just doesn't want to stop. It's been pumping continuously since May 21. Since 1 year now almost, we have a continuous pump without any freaking correction. And every time historically where we take a look at what has happened when the dollar index has been pumping like crazy, we can see that this was not very good for Bitcoin. I will exaggerate now the y-axis for Bitcoin so that we can see what I mean. So this of course starts in 2011, right? Let us look at what happened in 2011. The first huge rally of Bitcoin, when Bitcoin started trading in 2010 on Mt. Gox, was incidentally exactly in a dollar downtrend. So Bitcoin started trading exactly when the dollar was dumping like crazy, right? And as soon as the dollar reached its low, Bitcoin reached the top. And then the dollar started going up like crazy, and that is also the time when Bitcoin went down from 32 to $1. And I don't want to go to all instances, we did it a few times on this channel, you can check it, but you can already see it visually that there's an anti-correlation, right? Here you can see it, dollar down, Bitcoin up. Here you can see it, dollar down, Bitcoin up. Here you can see it, dollar down, Bitcoin up. So what is happening now? The dollar is pumping, and that is what keeps Bitcoin down. Bitcoin will not pump until this dollar starts dumping. Now, why is the stupid dollar pumping? Isn't there inflation? Shouldn't the dollar be dumping? Like, the USA printed insane amounts of money in response to the COVID crisis. I think the monetary supply M2 increased by 20% in 2020 alone. Shouldn't there be huge inflation? And shouldn't therefore, as a consequence, the dollar dump? Yes, that should be the case. However, keep in mind, please, that this is the dollar index. So this means comparing the dollar to other currencies. And if these other currencies also experience brutal inflation, then this means that the dollar can still rise because these other currencies will also experience insane inflation, right? So there's a lot of expectation now in the dollar. That's why it's pumping. What expectation? Well, the Federal Reserve, the Fed, is raising the interest rates, right? They started raising the interest rates. So everybody is now expecting the interest rates to be extremely pumped because inflation data came out yesterday or the day before yesterday, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and it showed that inflation is really insanely high, 7 or 8% year over year inflation. This is insanely high. It's the highest value since the early 80s. And this is after the CPI has already been modified such as to reflect quite a lot lower inflation than is actually the case. In reality, the CPI, if it would be calculated like it was calculated in the 80s and 90s, inflation would be in reality more like closer to 10 or even 15%. So inflation is running rampant. That means people expect the Fed to raise interest rates. Will the Fed do this? Yes, the Fed has already started. We see that historically since 1955, the interest rates have been quite high and they were rising and rising until they reached a peak in the early 80s. And since then, they have been going down historically. And we could almost say that there's some kind of resistance where the interest rates are struggling to get through right now. So right now we are at 0.2. They are continuing to rise, of course, now, and the people everyone is expecting the Fed to rise the interest rates 9 times this year. 9 times 0.2 basis points or 0.25 basis points until we are at 1.5 to 2% interest rate by the end of the year. That is the expectation. So now, because the CPI data came out the day before yesterday, or was it yesterday? I don't remember. Because the CPI data came out and showed brutally high inflation of officially 7 or 8%, but in reality it's more like 10 to 15%. Let's be realistic here. Everyone is now expecting as a reaction the Fed to raise the interest rates. And that is the reason why the dollar is pumping. Not because the dollar is really so strong, but because of expectation. The people expect the Fed to raise the interest rates, and therefore they sell their assets, they sell their stocks, they sell their stuff, because they expect the dollar to pump. Because if interest rates are getting higher, it's getting more difficult to lend money, to create money out of thin air. Therefore, the value of the dollar is increased, and therefore, consequently, the value of assets, of stocks, of Bitcoin and other assets is decreased, right? So that is the expectations. So now if we go back to the previous chart, we can already see that since the dollar has started pumping, Bitcoin is not performing. It is going sideways at best and always dipping down, right? And it's just not performing, which has also been the case last time when the dollar index was creeping upwards from 94 to over 100. In the period 2018 to 2020, the Bitcoin was also not performing. It was going sideways. It had this low in 2018 at 3,000. It didn't perform. And when did it start performing? Only as soon as the dollar dropped from 102.9 to the low of 89, right? That is a massive drop, and that is exactly the time when Bitcoin started performing and started pumping from around $10,000 to $65,000. That is no coincidence. It's anti-correlated to the dollar index. So what does that mean for us now? Because we want to have some nice earnings, right? This means, unfortunately, friends, that if the Fed continues now to raise the interest rates like crazy maniacs and the risk of crashing the market, if they continue aggressively raising the interest rates, and I'm talking 9 times this year, we will not get a Bitcoin bull market. We will not pump to 200,000 or 230,000. Let us go back for a second to the Bitcoin chart. We have the long-term trend channel, the long-term Bitcoin history trend channel. It's been in this logarithmic regression channel. And what do we see? We see that Bitcoin is not performing. Why? Because the dollar index is pumping like a crazy bastard. And the only time it was performing, as I said before, was from 10,000 to 65,000. But this was exactly the time when the dollar index was starting to dump, right? But now the dollar index is pumping like a crazy bastard. And if the Fed now continues to raise the interest rates like crazy maniacs and crash the entire stock market, then, friends, we will not have a rally this year. What will happen then? If the Fed increases the interest rates like crazy psychopaths this year, and they continue to do so, then we will see the following. This will be, friends, I'm very sorry to say this, but this will be a bit brutal now. Are you prepared for a bit of brutal stuff? Are you mentally prepared if I show you now what will happen if the Fed continues to raise the interest rates? It will be brutal, friends. It will be. Please be prepared. Sit down. Please sit down. Sit down in your chair. take a bottle of wine. I strongly suggest that you consume an alcoholic beverage now or some other form of tranquilizer, because it will be a bit brutal now, okay? Look guys, if the Fed continues to raise the interest rates like crazy bastards with disregard to the entire economy, risking to crash the entire American stock market, the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq, the SP 500, everything will brutally tank. If they risk it, I tell you what will happen with Bitcoin. We will revisit this trend line here. This is the weekly moving average 200. You see that historically it has been a very strong support for Bitcoin. It's following our logarithmic regression channel, and I cannot talk today. It's following our logarithmic regression channel. So we might revisit this line here. We wobble around until the Fed decides to ease their policy again, to become more dovish and to start lowering the interest rates again. Only then will we start pumping and make new all-time highs. Not before, friends. I'm really sorry to say this, but currently the fate of the Bitcoin bull market rests in the hands of some crazy psychopaths at the Federal Reserve Bank. I wish it wasn't so. I wish I could tell you that Bitcoin has completely decoupled from everything and Bitcoin is this safe haven asset that is completely independent from anything that's happening in the world, or even profits from if stuff goes wrong in the world. But unfortunately, friends, I'm really sorry to say this, I wish it wasn't so, but it's not the case. Bitcoin is strongly correlated to the world markets. It's strongly positively correlated to stocks, and it's strongly anti-correlated to the dollar index. But if now the Fed decides, hey, that was a bit too aggressive, we will not raise interest rates as aggressively as we said we would, and they backpedal and they are more dovish. This is called more dovish if they don't raise interest rates as aggressively. Then what will happen is Bitcoin will wobble around, and as soon as this is announced, the dollar index will dump like crazy and we are going up like crazy psychopaths, and we will go to our predicted $230,000 by the end of the year or early next year. But this happens only, friends, only if the Fed decides not to raise interest rates as aggressively as they announced. Because the expectation is that the Fed will raise 9 times this year. If they say they will raise only 5 times, that is already much less aggressive as the Fed was saying. So therefore the dollar will be brutally dumped and Bitcoin will brutally pump until the end of the year. So that is what is happening in the market. And if we look at the dollar index itself, it is, I have to say, friends, I'm sorry to say this, it's looking pretty aggressive, because I was thinking that it's pretty bearish, right? Because the RSI was saying, hey, bearish divergence, look, we are making new high here. We are already now above this point here, but the RSI is still lower. So we are technically still in a bearish divergence. And also we are massively overbought on the monthly stochastic RSI. And every time it has been so brutally overbought for a long time, we had massive corrections every single time, friends, every single time. So I was thinking, hey, this cannot be. Then also the Bollinger Band. If we look at the Bollinger Band now, it is breaking through the upper Bollinger Band like freaking nothing. And this only once happened before. Only once did it start from a wide Bollinger Band where it was sitting at the lower Bollinger Band and it had an immediate rally. It was not the case here, because here the Bollinger Band was narrow. It wasn't the case here. Here it got every time rejected at the upper Bollinger Band. The only time in history where it started a rally from a lower Bollinger Band and broke through the upper Bollinger Band with force was in the 90s. There was a massive bull run of the dollar from 1995 to 2002. Look at this. It was crazy. It was a crazy 7-year pump. The dollar index went from 79 to 120. That was crazy. That was the only time in history where I saw this happening. Every time else, it got rejected at the upper Bollinger Band, and here it was also starting from a very narrow Bollinger Band. So this is also different. So this was the only time where something similar happened. If, friends, now, I hope this will not be the case, but if this was to repeat, if we now go on a multi-year spree of the dollar index, then we can forget our Bitcoin bull market, friends. We can forget it. We will not see a Bitcoin bull market in that time. I'm sorry to say this. It might be the case that we have small pumps in between now and then, but a big bull run to 300,000 or stuff like that, we can forget it. So we have to hope that the Fed are not complete psychopaths, that they will not crash the market, and that they will backpedal to some degree from this aggressive stance of raising the interest rates like crazy maniacs. Only if now the dollar gets rejected here at some point and starts dumping by I don't know how much, only then, friends, can we have a Bitcoin bull market, and consequently a crypto bull market, and consequently many altcoins pumping 10x, 20x, 50x, 100x. Only then. Yes, I'm sorry to say this, but what will happen to the crypto market now lies in the hands of a few psychos at the Federal Reserve Bank. That is unfortunately how this market works. The only scenario I could imagine where Bitcoin pumps despite the dollar index pumping is massive adoption. If now, for whatever reason, a massive adoption use case happens, for example, Amazon integrates Bitcoin, and there's a super easy to use Bitcoin worldwide solution where it's being adopted by everyone and everyone is buying Bitcoin now and getting into Bitcoin. That is of course a white swan event that is not predictable. So in case of super massive adoption spike, this of course, my prediction here is wrong. And then we can completely neglect the dollar index, because then we will have massive price appreciation despite the dollar pumping. But I think the probability for this to happen exactly in this time frame, in the next 6 to 12 months, is not exactly super high. So I think as long as the dollar will pump like crazy, and as long as the Fed will raise interest rates like crazy, we will not see Bitcoin having a bull market. Only if the Fed now backpedals a bit and says, hey guys, we will go down with our aggressive rate hikes, only then can we have a Bitcoin bull market. And I don't know, Bitcoin to 230,000, Ethereum to 25,000, XRP to 50, I don't know, Doge to a few dollars. Only then can we have these scenarios. If that doesn't happen, friends, then we will have a bear market. And this means that we might break down here and wobble around for quite some time. And then the next time where we see a massive rise might only be as late as 2023 or 2024. At the latest, the next time Bitcoin has the halving, which will be in 2024, I think, early 2024. And then we will have the bull market. That is the worst case scenario that can happen to us now. But I think the probability that the Fed will just crash the entire market is quite low. I think the Fed will backpedal, and then they will suddenly say, oh guys, sorry, we will not raise as aggressively as we said we would, and instead of 9 rate hikes, they will only do 5 rate hikes this year. And as soon as this will become clear, the dollar index will brutally dump, and Bitcoin and the whole crypto market will brutally pump, and we will see an insane rise later this year. So friends, not everything is lost. Don't despair. The chances are not so bad that we will get another insane bull run by the end of the year. But unfortunately, this is not guaranteed. It lies in the hands of a few psychos at the Federal Reserve. Thank you, friends, for watching. I hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please consider subscribing to this small illustrious channel of a few crypto enthusiasts, we would welcome you to this illustrious small club of super smart and cool and awesome people here in this small, wonderful crypto family. And everyone is super friendly. I can guarantee you there are no trolls yet here. They will come. Believe me, they will come. You cannot do anything on YouTube without assholes and trolls. That is standard for YouTube, but currently there are still a lot of friendly people here, so I would welcome you in this illustrious small crypto family. Thanks for watching, friends, and see you next time.